grandma gave it to me. And I'm like, why didn't you call us? And they would say like, oh, I didn't want to bother you. This isn't a big deal. And I'm like, oh no, this is a huge deal. Anything that's important to you is important to us. So, and that's kind of what I tried when we do hire new officers. I get to spend 2 weeks with them in the beginning, which is great because I try to prime them for our cultural expectations, because as we said, every single department has its own culture, and our culture really, really values community engagement, really values using the term, survivors instead of victims, because if I call someone a victim, they're going to feel, look, and sit a certain way. If I tell somebody you're a survivor, that gives them a little bit more empowerment and hope. So yes, de-escalation, communication, physical fitness is huge, so big. I was just talking about this the other day, and I told somebody I used to be a long distance runner. I did about like 18 or 19 half marathons and a full marathon. And I love my kids so much. And when I speak about kids, people feel my passion. They're like, oh, how many kids do you have? And I was like, I don't know, hundreds. Like, I lost count. I said, every child in my life is mine. I don't care if I don't know their name. Every child in my life is mine. And I remember, like, I think it was shortly after Sandy Hook in 2012, we really upped our active shooter drills in schools. And again, you want to talk about training and stress inoculation. I remember clearing the hallway of a middle school in a controlled environment. But obviously, we try to make our trainings as realistic as possible. Yes. And I was so, like, the cortisol and the adrenaline was pumping, and I felt so weak, and I could not even like hold my weapon up for more than a minute. And I was like, oh no, something's got to change. This is not it for me. So after my full marathon, I completely stopped running and I got into weightlifting. And I started doing like weightlifting, and then I started doing hot yoga. And I tell people, like, hot yoga definitely has its physical benefits, but it absolutely has more mental benefits than a lot of people realize, like in terms of like being non-judgmental, self-forgiveness. Yes. It really, really, really changed my life. And I think that, like, when officers are not physically fit, you're not just risking your own life, because we know that, like, we are more likely to die of like heart attacks, cardiovascular events. So many things go wrong with our body to begin with because of the constant stress that we're under in the job, let alone the factors that we have to deal with. And someone at the gym, when I lived in another city, they're like, what are you training for? And I was like, life. Like, I don't know what might happen on my next call. And I'm not like, I'm very reasonable. I just make sure that I build a body that can run, and I can build a body that can lift weights, because I worry about me going to a call and then having to go to a parent afterwards and saying, sorry, I couldn't drag your loved one out because they weigh 120 pounds and I only trained to drag out 100 pounds. You know what I mean? Like, how ridiculous does that sound? Or, sorry, I couldn't get to your loved one soon enough, even though I had the AED in my hand, because I'm not capable of running. That's not a conversation that I'm willing to have in my career, So I take physical fitness and mental wellness extremely serious, because if we don't take care of ourselves, that puts your family in danger. That puts our community in danger. And I'm not saying that you have to spend all this money on like protein and collagen and vitamins. I'm saying you have to be capable to do what the call requires or what the job requires. And to us, we don't even know what that is. So I would rather like prepare and plan as much as I possibly can and not need it than need it and not have it. And I'm really big on like taking accountability when it comes to our training and development. And I always talk about this when I get a chance, because it's kind of like a point of contention with some officers. And I don't disagree with them. Like, they do say that, like, if I attend a training, I do expect my department to pay for the training. And if they don't pay, I'm not going. Which I understand that, like, we don't want to be doing things for free, nor do we want to pay out of pocket routinely to do things. But not everybody is privileged enough, like I have been, to be with departments that are financially stable enough to send you to training. So as an officer, what are you going to do? And if you are not trained and something goes wrong, I tell officers all the time, do you think your department is going to be like, oh yeah, that's us, it's our bad, we'll take the liability? That's not going to happen, It's not going to happen. So I always encourage officers, like, use your resources, do audiobooks, listen to YouTube videos. There is a plethora of things out there that are free and that will not cost you a penny and will absolutely help you do your job more in a productive and safe manner. But yeah, in terms of training, we can't train enough. There's no way, because no two calls are the same.
Yes, yes, thank you. And we actually will touch on mental wellness very shortly. As a hero to so many women in policing, what advice would you give to any woman considering a career in law enforcement?
First of all, thank you so much. I'm just a girl from Akron. Sometimes I say I'm just a girl from Egypt that is very much hell bent on just like making a difference. And honestly, I try to be who I needed when I was younger. And, we can talk for a very long time about the challenges of parenting alone. And add to that the challenges that come with being a parent and an immigrant family. So my parents are like the most amazing people in the world. My mom is my biggest hero. And when we moved to the US in 1991, it's not that I didn't have like someone to talk to. It's that like I was a kid and my parents were trying to build a life in another country without resources, without family, without support. So yeah, like our kids are very lucky because they have aunts and uncles and they have such a large network of support, which is very different than how my siblings and I grew up. And I saw something on Instagram the other day, and it made me so happy to read and just reflect on it. And it said, you became the woman you needed when you were younger. And that should be
Wow.
your measure of success, and it's truly like so heartfelt and so heartwarming to be like, dang, like that's true. And that's why I focus on the juvenile population so much. And I started teaching a class here in our immediate area in the state about the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experience study, and childhood trauma and how that impacts kids. And when I teach it, I always tell officers that I'm not making excuses for people's bad or criminal behavior. I'm just letting you know how much childhood adversity really impacts the kids that we deal with. And an ACEs score does exist among the law enforcement community as well. So it forces them to think about their own traumas. But yeah, so the advice that I would give other women, like in general, and it's just things that I really wish that I would have heard when I was younger, because especially kids, like, I've spoken at like a school assembly and I've spoken at the women's prison, and it's very hard for people to like look at my Instagram or LinkedIn and just see like accolades and success and newspaper articles. And I'm like, let me talk to you about the other side of that. And let's talk about how many times I've hit rock bottom and crashed and burned. And let me talk to you about how I almost got kicked out of Kent State University because I was a follower and I had zero self-confidence. And let's talk about all of the terrible, harmful impacts that can come from simply you not believing in yourselves and the words that you regurgitate in your brain and head and heart all day. And I tell them that like I'm so grateful for all of the great things that I've had the opportunity to do, and all of the great things that I've gotten to accomplish in my career. But I really wish that I wouldn't have lived in so much self-doubt. And I really wish that like in high school and my earlier years of college, mind you, when I went to college I was 16. So
Mm,
but I was very much a follower, and I very much like try to please the wrong group of people. And it's so dangerous when you think about like a 16-year-old, a 19-year-old, a 21-year-old, even like it doesn't even matter what stage they are in their life. Imagine the amount, or imagine the kind of decisions that we would make if we walked around and we told ourselves that we can never amount to anything great and that we're going to be a loser for the rest of our lives. And it doesn't matter. That's going to dictate every single one of your decision makings. That's going to
wow.
dictate how you eat and drink. That's going to dictate if you wake up at 6 and go to the gym, or if you're sleeping at noon every day. It's going to dictate how you treat officers on traffic stops. It's going to dictate what you put in your body. It changes the entire trajectory of your life and your day. And versus waking up feeling empowered, feeling like you have the ability to accomplish great things, feeling like you have at least one person, if not more, a whole community that supports you, that loves you, that wants to see you happy, healthy, and successful. That's going to change how you make every decision, right? It's going to change what you eat and drink and put in your body. It's going to change your group of friends. And that's what I really try to leave with the kids when I taught there, or when I was a school resource officer. And like I said, it doesn't matter because I'm 41 And I'm like, I feel like I'm still a kid. So when I
Mm.
heard people say that when I was younger, because when you're younger, you're like, yeah, people in their 30s have it together. And then you get to your 30s and you're like, okay, maybe people in their 40s have it together. But no, we are always evolving, right? We're always growing. And I try to tell people, like, believe in yourself, be authentic, do not succumb to everything that society wants you to be. Do not succumb to the multi-billion-dollar beauty industry that tells you that your skin isn't the right color, your hair's not the right texture, you need to lose weight, you need to be more skinny. The diet industry, there's so many distractions around us. And like, if you really, really look around us and ask yourself, what do we have that tells us that we're good enough as we are? Nothing. Nothing that I see. Nothing in
Yes.
magazines, nothing online, nothing on like the Instagram influencers. I'm sorry, what are you influencing? More bad behavior? So I really, that's the bottom line. I really, really, really try to be who I needed when I was younger to everybody around me, including myself, every single day. And the reason why I mention age is because I did learn in my career that the conversations that I was having with my students in sixth grade, eighth grade, and high school were the same conversations I was having with people that were 50 and 60 years old on calls, because people need to hear that. People need to hear that,
Wow.
like, it's okay that you're having a bad day. It is okay that you made a mistake. And even when we did Safety Town, and we took the kids through the police department, they always want to see the jail. And I remember one of the kids saying, like, is this where you keep the bad people? And I said, okay, sometimes police officers deal with bad people. The majority of the times we deal with good people that make bad decisions, because
Yes.
I don't want them to, for somebody that they love to have a contact with law enforcement, get arrested, go to jail, whatever the case may be, and then be like, nope, you're a bad person. Like, we can't have a relationship anymore. You're a bad person. You failed. No, we're good people. Sometimes we make bad decisions. And let's talk about how we can prevent ourselves from making those bad decisions and how we can move forward from them. So yeah, that's, just be yourself, be authentic, try to be 1% better every day, invest in yourself, really protect your peace. I think that it takes us a very long time to realize that people having access to us is a privilege, not a right. And
Wow.
unfortunately, for some people, that is even within the family. And speaking of trauma-informed policing, I love, love, love Gabor Mate. He is an MD, I believe, wrote numerous books, and he comes from a family of Holocaust survivors. And he has so many books that talk about the impacts of stress on our body and mind, and how for women, we are more likely to develop more autoimmune diseases because we have a hard time saying no. And because culturally, regardless of where you look in the world, we are expected basically to be people pleasers. Like, I don't
Wow.
want to, I
Okay.
don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to do this for my parents, but I will. I don't want to do this for my siblings, but I will. I'm in a really toxic relationship and I don't want to disappoint my parents by getting a divorce, things like that. And if you look at any of his work, again, his name is Gabor Mate. He talks about like the hidden cost of stress. One of his excellent books is Scattered Minds and When the Body Says No. And he has a couple of really good ones on addiction as well.
Wow. Wow. That is extremely powerful. It's something that is often not highlighted enough. Now, related to that, for any woman in policing that is afraid to pursue leadership opportunities, what advice would you give them?
Don't be afraid. So I just looked up the stat on this the other day. There is not nationwide, about 13% of the profession is female. And then not a lot of women are in supervisory positions. And 40% of police departments in the United States don't even have a full-time female officer, which is extremely problematic because we do bring a lot to the profession. We do bring a lot to the career. And like, it's really important that you ask that question, because I thought to myself, why? And I always, my knee-jerk reaction, to be completely honest with you, my knee-jerk reaction, and also because of personal experience, is I always think like the department doesn't want a female supervisor. That is my knee-jerk reaction, being honest. But I also have had conversation with a lot of female officers that are like, I don't even want to try, because they're not going to allow that here, or I don't want the headache, or I don't want the
Wow.
responsibility. And a lot of them, and I'll tell you this, and I see this a lot, and I promise you, this changed my entire life. I remember vividly in 2018, I was going through something, and it was like an epiphany. And I came across David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. And I love that book for a lot of reasons. I admire that man so much. And the reason I fell in love with him and his work, aside from the fact that he also was a long distance runner, is that like he talks about his life, and he talks about how terrible and horrible his life was, from being obese to cheating in school to getting kicked out of school to like growing up in a family where DV was an everyday thing, to flipping the switch and harnessing accountability and not failing failure. People that fail,
Hmm.
that are afraid to fail, I feel like they're sitting in the corner and they're afraid to experience life. And I saw such a huge change with how I do things after I read that book, and like after I really like internalized a lot of the information that I read. And being that I was like sometimes the only female in a lot of classes that I went to, like whether it was like academic classes, firearm classes, whatever the case may be. And I was extremely shy, extremely reserved, afraid to fail, afraid to mess up, afraid to be embarrassed. And then afterwards, if the instructor said I need a volunteer, I was like, I'll do it. Or who wants to go first? And this, I'll do it. And like, of course, is my behavior impacting women around me? Yes, but my behavior is also impacting everybody around me, because people always tell me like, dang, you just don't care. I was like, I'm not, what's going to happen? I'm not going to die. Like what? I'm going to fail. I'm going to mess up. Okay. We're all here to learn. I'll be the example. Let me be the example. So I am not afraid to put myself out there at all whatsoever, because I know that I'm human. I know that I'm full of flaws. I know that I'm going to fail. And because of what has happened in the past, I have proven to myself that every time I do crash and burn, sometimes I may be down there for a couple of hours, sometimes it may be a couple of days, a couple of weeks, depending on the circumstances, but I'm going to get back up. I'm going to utilize my resources of my community, and I'm going to move forward. So I do believe that more women need to take the chance of taking a supervisory position within their department. I feel like more women in law enforcement need to be FTOs, like field training officers. And
Yes.
here's the beautiful thing about law enforcement is men bring a lot to the table, women bring a lot to the table. We complement each other's differences. When we
Yes.
arrive on scene, like in my previous department, we had a way of handling domestics. When I worked night shift for 8 years, and pending the situation allowed, because sometimes it did not, when we went to domestics, the male officers always handled the suspect, which is not always, but was usually male. And I always spoke with the victim, because I'm a victim advocate at heart and I had victim advocate training. And I always spoke with the survivor and the victim, as well as the kids. And it worked out so well. And it's the same with sexual assault cases. Like, we don't always assume, but we ask the survivor, would you like to speak to a male or female officer? And men can absolutely be victims and survivors of DV and sexual assault.
Mm.
And I have to say that because a lot of people, like, they don't like how, whether it's in literature or academics or in trainings, they always say he for the suspect. The suspect could also absolutely be a female in the cases of DV and in the cases of those perpetuating sexual violence. But sexual assault, do you want to speak to a male or female? What's going to happen if they say, yeah, I want to speak to a female, and you don't have female officers? Like, that's going to be problematic,
Yes.
And now it's okay to rely on other police departments, and it's okay to rely on your forensic interviewers in your community and like resources like that. But imagine the type of training and the experience that your female officers have. And we need to be everywhere within the community, and we need to be everywhere within professions, and in also different degree of the profession. So it's extremely important to see female officers on the road, and to see female officers within supervisory position, because we do things very differently. And that's science. That's not my opinion. If you look at a lot of the work
Hmm.
that 30 by 30 does, or Nolly, or a lot of so many great organizations out there that promote women in law enforcement, they have done studies and researches and surveys that prove that women bring a different element to policing. And we're not trying to eradicate our male partners, because that sounds ridiculous when it's within itself. But we are trying to let people know that women bring a certain degree of compassion, empathy, communication, nurturing to the profession, which is very much needed. And I'm not saying also that our male counterparts are incapable of doing that. They absolutely do that, and they do it very well. Again, we complement each other's differences.
Yes, thank you. And I am so thankful that you were able to speak to that and provide viewers, listeners with an opportunity to hear that for someone that has really overcame so many challenges and obstacles and barriers. Now, with such a demanding career and profession, how do you take care of yourself mentally?
Well, I could definitely do better. One of my really, really, really good friends, AK Dezanti, also a Kent State graduate, she wrote 2 books. One of them is called Beat the Burnout. It's on Amazon. It is so amazing. And I met her. I went through the police academy at Kent State in 06 or 07, and she went right after me, and I got into running at the time, so I used to run with her class. And man, she's just such an amazing person. And I was one of the reviewers for her book before it got published. And I just remember reading it, and I was like, oh my God, I feel so called out right now. And I tried not to text her with like every page that I read, but I definitely was like, yeah, so this makes sense. Like, why am I like this? Now I understand why I'm like this. There's so much room for growth. I'm actually reading another book right now called Widen the Window, and it talks about how our brain and body react to trauma and stress and burnout. Because I tried to learn about my bad habits, why I have those bad habits, and how to undo those bad habits. I was very big into running, as I mentioned before. Yeah, like too big into running. Like I lack the gray area, something else that David Goggins and I have in common. So when I want to run, I I I would say that, like, okay, I did 6 miles yesterday, I have to do 8 today. And then, okay, I did 8 miles yesterday, today I have to do 10. Because to me, doing the same thing is just not an option, which is very, very unhealthy. Because
Mm.
if I have a half an hour, why not just go for a 2 mile run, instead of saying like, oh, I have a half an hour, I'm not going to work out today. So I learned to not do that because my body wasn't having it. I got a lot of injuries, and one of the biggest reasons that I stopped running is because my body was not taking it well with my knees, with my back, my hips. It was just one injury after another. So now I still run. I just got back into it. I do hot yoga, which is extremely beneficial for mind, body, and soul. I'm very, very, very big on HIIT workouts, high intensity interval training workouts. I go
Okay.
to this amazing gym in the city of Solon called Form 216. It is owned by amazing, amazing single mom. And I tell her all the time that, like, she's very big on functional fitness. And I'm like, by the way, you know how we do A, B, and C in class? Well, I did that at work the other day with 2 sandbags. Like, because when it comes to physical fitness, like I said before, okay, we're carrying like dumbbells and kettlebells and all this other stuff. 24 hours from now, that could be me carrying like someone's child or grandma, like our
Yes.
body, we go through all of this mental motion in class. And I always tell myself, like, oh my God, I remember doing this on a call where it was a house fire, or I remember doing this. And that's another thing that people don't understand about law enforcement. Going back to our conversation earlier, is that, like, there have been situations where people avoided calling the police and they called the fire department, not knowing that we're coming anyways. And people